The wind whispered through the cracked windows, carrying with it the scent of pine and damp earth, as though the forest itself had been waiting. It had been years, but Barbara still felt the weight of that day, as though it were just yesterday. She could almost hear Sophie's laughter, light and free, as she rode Willow through the woods behind their farm, familiar, yet somehow too distant to touch. The old barn sat in the distance, empty now, its once welcoming doors creaking in protest against the wind. Above them, the sky stretched wide, the horizon smudged with early twilight, a reminder that nothing could stay the same forever. Inside the barn, the stillness was suffocating. The saddle was gone, but the soft scrape of leather against hay still lingered in the air. There was a picture, just one, tucked in the corner of the dusty shelf. A faded photograph, the edges curling with time. Sophie, smiling, standing beside the willow. The horse's mane, wild and unkempt, just as it had been that morning. But something about the photo felt wrong. The silence of the barn was more than just the absence of sound. It was as if the walls themselves held their breath, waiting for a truth that had never been spoken. Something, Barbara would later realize, was buried here, something she had left behind in the chaos of that long-forgotten search. The wind outside pressed against the glass, rattling it, as if the world was trying to break through the walls of this place. But all Barbara could hear was the soft echo of her own heartbeat and the faint rustle of something just beyond the edge of her memory. A whisper calling her back, and with it, the unsettling sense that something was waiting to be uncovered, something she wasn't ready to face. But it was about to begin again. The air in Tuscany was crisp that morning, carrying with it the scent of the earth, rich and damp, a hint of lavender drifting in from the hills. The sun was just beginning its slow ascent, casting long shadows over the sprawling fields below. Barbara Whitmore stood at the edge of the equestrian grounds, her eyes unfocused, staring at nothing in particular. The world around her buzzed with activity, yet she remained still like a forgotten stone amidst a rushing river. She should have felt a sense of accomplishment. This was her chance to revive Whitmore Stables, to bring her small, struggling farm back into the light. Yet, there was nothing but a hollow space where hope used to be. A cavern left by the years of searching, the endless inquiries that led to dead ends. Sophie, gone without a trace. Gone for 8 years. She had hoped that with time, the pain might ease, that the ache in her chest would dull into a quiet sadness, but it never had. Barbara's jacket, a weathered thing, its edges worn and faded, the color nearly indistinguishable from the dirt beneath her feet, had seen years of sorrow, years of grief. She traced a finger along the fabric, feeling the smoothness of the thread, as though the very stitches carried the weight of the loss she couldn't escape. This jacket, this one item, had been with her from the beginning of her search and still clung to her like a ghost. She should have let it go. But like everything else from that time, it remained frozen in a moment when Sophie was still alive. It's been so long, She muttered under her breath, as if she could make the words real, could make the years slip away in a single breath. The world keeps turning, but I never have. I'm stuck in that moment, that loss. The words left her mouth like a confession. Quiet, almost drowned out by the sounds of hooves and voices from the competition grounds. But they echoed in her mind, repeating the truth she'd never dared to speak aloud. Her team was busy, moving briskly around the stable, preparing Mira, the horse they hoped would bring them success. But Barbara wasn't there with them. She was here, standing on the precipice of the past, watching as the world moved forward without her. The land of Italy, so rich and beautiful, felt foreign to her now. It didn't belong to her. None of this did. Not after what she'd lost. She turned her gaze toward the competition ring, where riders and horses practiced their routines, and the crowd, both familiar and foreign, watched with eager eyes. Barbara's heart squeezed, but not for the competition. No, her mind wasn't here, not fully. Her thoughts were with a little girl, long lost, a memory she couldn't shake. That's when she saw her, a young girl, no older than Sophie had been when she vanished, was standing by one of the horses. She was brushing the animal's coat with careful, practiced strokes. Her movements were fluid, rhythmic, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Barbara's eyes narrowed. She didn't know why, but something about the girl's actions seemed familiar. Too familiar. As the girl stepped back to examine her work, Barbara caught sight of her hair. A braid, tight and perfect, winding down the back of her neck. It was Sophie's braid. The same way Sophie had always braided Willow's mane before their rides in the woods. The same pattern, the same delicate precision. Barbara's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't breathe. The world around her seemed to blur and fade. The sounds of the bustling equestrian center muffled as if she were underwater. It was impossible. It had to be. This girl, this young stranger, couldn't be the child she had lost. But the memory rushed forward like a tidal wave, knocking everything aside. The ghost of her daughter, so strong it left her dizzy, overwhelmed by a grief she'd long buried. She whispered to herself, her voice trembling despite the soft certainty in her words. That's how Sophie used to braid Willow's mane. It can't be. Her fingers, stiff and cold, curled into fists at her sides as she fought to stay anchored in the present. She tried to move, to look away, to walk toward her team and forget what she'd seen. But her body wouldn't obey. Her gaze remained fixed on the girl. The air around her grew heavier, thicker with every second. The image of the braid haunted her, unraveling a knot in her chest that she thought had been long tied up. She forced herself to breathe. She had to be wrong. There were thousands of young girls here, hundreds of braids. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows over the ring, and she could see nothing but the girl's hair, the braids, the delicate way her hands worked as though she had been taught, just as Sophie had. But the truth clawed its way up her throat, strangling her. Was it possible? A chill ran down Barbara's spine. a creeping sensation that told her this was only the beginning. This wasn't just some misplaced memory. This felt like something more, something deeper, buried for years, waiting for the right moment to rise. As Barbara stood there, locked in the gaze of a girl who seemed to belong to a past she had never left behind, something shifted. From somewhere behind that silence, from somewhere in the shadows of memory, came a sound she hadn't heard in years. The unmistakable sound of a horse's hooves, echoing through the quiet of the arena. And just for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped turning. Barbara's gaze lingered on the horse. It stood patiently beside the young girl, its coat deep bay, rich and glossy, its white markings strikingly familiar. As the horse shifted slightly, Barbara's heart skipped, a jolt of recognition rushing through her. The shape of the markings, the curve of its shoulders, even the way it stood, with its head slightly tilted, as though waiting for a command it was impossible not to see it. It was Willow, the same horse Sophie had adored, the one she had spent every waking moment with from the moment she could walk, the horse that had vanished with her daughter into the unknown. This couldn't be real. Her breath caught in her chest, and for a long moment, the world around her seemed to slip away. The noise from the equestrian center, the voices, the clatter of hooves, the buzz of excitement faded, and all she could hear was the pounding of her own pulse, loud and insistent in her ears. She tried to look away, to convince herself that this was a mistake, that it was just another horse with similar markings. But the way the horse moved, the way its eyes met hers with a recognition that sent a shiver down her spine, was unmistakable. It was Willow. But how could she be here in Italy after all these years? The question clung to Barbara like a weight, a horrible truth she couldn't shake. It wasn't possible. She had seen Willow's eyes, felt the weight of her body as Sophie leaned against her during those long, quiet afternoons on the farm. And yet, this wasn't just some memory. This was something too real, too vivid to dismiss. Her breath came quicker now, her chest tightening, and she found herself taking a step forward without thinking. The girl by the horse seemed unaware of her presence, brushing the mare's coat with steady hands. The same hands that once braided Willow's mane, that once whispered softly to the horse, urging her on. It was Sophie's touch, but this time, the hands were not her daughter's. They were the hands of someone else. Someone who reminded her of everything she had lost. Barbara's heart pounded harder, and she clenched her fists at her sides. She couldn't just stand here, frozen in this place where the past collided with the present, where the impossible was standing right in front of her. She had to know. She had to find out what was going on. With a resolve she didn't fully feel, Barbara moved through the crowd, her legs heavy, as if walking through a dream. The air around her felt dense, thick with the weight of all the unanswered questions she had carried for years. Each step felt like a defiance of the reality she had built in her grief. What was happening here? Why was Willow, her Willow, here? her eyes locked on a familiar figure across the ring. Walking with another horse, this one just as striking, just as perfect. It was Gregorio Duca, her late husband's closest friend, the man who had been a fixture in their lives until everything fell apart. His presence should have brought comfort, but instead, it made her stomach twist. He was walking with the horse, a proud smile on his face, exuding the same calm confidence that had always marked him, the same charm that had once convinced Barbara to trust him. His steps were deliberate, his gaze focused ahead. Gregorio. Barbara hadn't seen him in years, not since Sophie disappeared. He had been there, offering words of comfort, of support. But his presence had always felt like a shadow she couldn't quite place. As he drew closer, Barbara could feel the weight of his gaze on her, and she knew he saw her too. He recognized her, just as she recognized him. But now, there was something different in the air between them. The old familiarity had turned to something else, something colder, more distant, as if the years of silence had carved a new space between them. Gregorio, Barbara said, her voice barely above a whisper, though the words carried the weight of so many unspoken truths. It's been a long time. Why is Willow here? What's going on? The question came out, jagged and raw, pulling the silence between them tighter. She could see the slight twitch of his eyebrows, the briefest flicker of surprise in his eyes, before his expression shifted back to the practiced calm she had come to expect from him. "I'm not sure I understand, Barbara," he said smoothly, his Italian accent still as strong as it had been all those years ago. "What do you mean?" But Barbara wasn't fooled by the smoothness of his words. She could see it in his eyes, the flicker of something darker, something hidden beneath the surface. She had known him too long, trusted him too much, to not see the lie. "Willow," she repeated, her voice rising just slightly, enough to break through the pretense. "This horse, it's her, isn't it? I know that face, those eyes. How is she here? How is she alive?" Gregorio's expression faltered for just a moment, too brief for anyone but Barbara to notice, but it was enough. The truth was there, hanging in the air like smoke, too close to ignore. He had known something all along, something he hadn't told her, something that didn't make sense, something that shouldn't have been possible. Barbara took a step closer, her breath coming faster now. The questions burned inside her, scorching her skin, her hands trembling at her sides. "What have you done? Gregorio, what is happening here?" But before he could answer, the moment stretched longer, the silence between them deepening as the world around them moved on. The sound of horses' hooves in the distance, the chatter of the crowd, the soft murmur of competition, it all faded into the background as Barbara waited for the truth. And when Gregorio spoke again, it wasn't the words she had expected. "It's not what you think." "Barbara?" he said, his voice quieter now, more controlled. But his eyes betrayed something else, something darker. The world around them continued, oblivious. But for Barbara, the game had changed. Something in that brief exchange had shifted, something that would unravel everything she thought she knew. The conversation with Gregorio had left Barbara feeling like she was standing on the edge of a precipice. He had offered no answers, only vague reassurances that didn't sit right. The weight of suspicion pressed down on her chest, thick and suffocating. Something wasn't adding up. There was too much hidden in his silence, too much that he wasn't saying. She could feel it in her bones. Barbara moved through the competition grounds, her mind still racing, unable to make sense of what she had just heard. The horse, the resemblance. She kept seeing those eyes, those familiar markings, and it was impossible to shake the feeling that eternal Luz was somehow connected to Willow. But how and why did Gregorio's presence feel so suffocatingly close to something sinister? As if answering her unspoken questions. A voice interrupted her thoughts, low, hesitant, and laced with something Barbara couldn't place. "I think we need to talk." Barbara turned to find Bella standing at a distance, her posture stiff and uneasy, her eyes darting nervously toward the horses in the ring. The woman, once so poised and charming, now looked fragile, almost as if the weight of the conversation she had been holding back was finally pushing through. Her smile was tight, forced, the kind of smile that couldn't hide the unease creeping into her gaze. Bella's eyes, usually so calm and composed, were shadowed with something darker now. Something Barbara couldn't yet name. Barbara nodded, her curiosity piqued. Without a word, she followed Bella to a quieter corner of the grounds, away from the hustle and bustle of the competition. Bella led her to a secluded area near a small grove of trees, where the sounds of the competition were muffled by the thick branches above. "I shouldn't be telling you this," Bella began, her voice barely a whisper. "But I can't keep it inside anymore." Barbara's heart skipped a beat as Bella's words seemed to echo in the silence between them. She had known for some time that Gregorio's charm hid something far darker. But hearing it from Bella, the woman who had been living beside him all these years, made the reality feel even more suffocating. "You've never asked me to do this before, Barbara," Bella continued, her voice trembling now. "But he's insistent. The horse isn't mine. It belongs to someone else." Bella paused, swallowing hard, as though the words burned her tongue. "It belongs to you. It's Willow." Barbara's breath caught in her throat, her mind spinning, heart racing. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. She stepped back, her mind struggling to process the words. "What do you mean it's Willow?" Barbara's voice was barely above a whisper, the question hanging in the air between them, full of both disbelief and desperation. "That horse is in Italy, with your name on it. What do you know about it, Bella?" Bella's eyes dropped to the ground, unable to meet Barbara's gaze. Her hand shook, and for the first time, Barbara saw the truth in her eyes. The truth that had been buried beneath layers of pretense, of silence. "I didn't want this. But Gregorio, he forced me to claim her as my own," Bella whispered. "He said it was the only way to make everything Right again. She choked on the last word, as though it tasted bitter. But I don't know how or why. Barbara? I don't know what he's done, but I'm starting to fear what he's hiding from all of us. A chill ran down Barbara's spine, the weight of Bella's confession sinking deep into her bones. She had suspected Gregorio, but hearing it from Bella, it became a crushing weight, a truth she wasn't sure she could bear. This wasn't just about a missing horse. This was something far darker, something twisted that Barbara couldn't yet understand. What was Gregorio hiding? What had he done to keep Willow and Sophie in his grasp all these years? Before Barbara could respond, Bella hurriedly glanced around, her face pale, her eyes filled with the urgency of someone desperate to flee the truth they had just unleashed. "I'm sorry," Bella said quickly, taking a step back. "I shouldn't have said anything. You need to go. Find the answers before it's too late." Barbara didn't have time to ask more. The fear in Bella's voice was unmistakable, and Barbara, with a growing sense of dread, nodded. She didn't know where this path would lead her, but the truth was clearer now more than she had ever wanted to face. Without another word, Barbara walked away, her heart pounding in her chest. The words, "It belongs to you," its Willow echoing in her mind. Her steps led her toward Gregorio's estate, the weight of her grief and her mounting fury pushing her forward. She needed answers. She had to know the truth. The grand estate loomed ahead, its tall gates a silent sentinel. Inside, there was a darkness that hung heavy in the air, a sense of foreboding that seemed to follow Barbara as she stepped across the threshold. She moved through the sprawling hallways, feeling the eerie emptiness pressing in from all sides, until she reached a small room at the back of the house. It was a storage room, cluttered with forgotten things, old furniture draped in dusty sheets. The faint smell of aged leather filled the room, and Barbara's eyes got on an object in the corner, something she hadn't noticed before. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. It was Willow's saddle. Barbara's heart stopped. The leather was worn, the stitching frayed in places, but the embossed initials, her daughter's name, were still visible, etched into the leather as clearly as the day they had first received it. This is Willow's saddle," Barbara whispered, her voice shaking, the room spinning around her as the weight of the truth crushed down on her chest. "What has he done with my daughter?" The words hung in the air, unanswered. The deep, suffocating grief that had lived inside Barbara for so many years rose again. But this time, it was fueled by something else afire. A need to confront the man who had stolen her daughter's life. The saddle in her hands was the key to something darker, something Barbara was now determined to unravel. Whatever it took, Barbara stood frozen, the saddle heavy in her hands, her fingers numb as the weight of it became unbearable. The room felt smaller now, suffocating, the air thick with something darker, deeper. The revelation of Willow's saddle had sent her heart into a tailspin, but it was the thought that clung to her like a shadow. What if this wasn't just about Willow? What if Sophie was out there, to what if she had been kept hidden all this time, just as Willow had. She moved quickly now, her steps growing more urgent as she crossed the grand halls of Gregorio's estate. Her breath came faster, her pulse loud in her ears. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to find him. Find the truth. Gregorio, the man who had once been her husband's closest friend, the man who had once offered her kindness and reassurance, the man who had held the keys to her daughter's fate all these years. When she finally found him, he was standing by a large window, looking out at the sprawling estate. His back was to her, but he didn't need to turn around for Barbara to know that he had been waiting for her. He had known she would come. "Gregorio," she said, her voice low, filled with a quiet fury that was simmering just beneath the surface. "What have you done with my daughter? Where is she?" He turned slowly, his face an unsettling mask of calm. For a moment, he said nothing, just studied her as if sizing her up. The air between them was thick now, charged with the weight of years of silence, of hidden truths. "I see you found the saddle," he said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. "It's a nice piece of history, isn't it?" Barbara didn't answer. She couldn't. The words were caught in her throat, suffocated by the truth she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. Gregorio's expression shifted, just slightly, as he took a step toward her, his eyes colder now. "You're looking for answers, Barbara," he said, his voice softer, almost patronizing. "But I wonder, are you ready to hear the truth? The whole truth?" Barbara's hands tightened around the saddle, her nails digging into the worn leather. "What have you done to Sophie? What did you do all those years? You lied. You took her. I didn't take her. Barbara." Gregorio interrupted, his voice cold now, his eyes narrowing. "I gave her a life, a better life than she would have ever had with you. You couldn't have given her what I did. She was better off." The words struck Barbara like a slap, but they weren't the worst of it. It was the cold, twisted justification in his eyes, the casual way he spoke of Sophie as though she was some possession, something to be controlled, manipulated, used for his gain. "You abducted her," Barbara whispered, the words tasting like ash on her tongue. "You brainwashed her." The realization hit her then, the horror of it, like a tidal wave crashing over her. Sophie, her daughter, had been trapped. For 8 long years, she had been kept under Gregorio's thumb, her light and her spirit slowly chipped away. Gregorio didn't flinch. "I gave her opportunities she would never have had on your little farm. Barbara," he said, his voice becoming eerily calm. "She had a better life. Barbara. She should be grateful." The words fell like stones into Barbara's chest. Grateful, grateful for what? For the stolen years, for the lies, for the prison he had built around her daughter. The fury that had been simmering inside her since she first stepped into this house now rose up all at once, and she couldn't hold it back. "You took everything from me," she screamed, her voice breaking, her eyes filling with tears. The rage, the grief, it all collided in that moment. You stole my daughter's childhood, her life. You took her from me, and you twisted her into someone I don't even recognize anymore. Gregorio's smile remained, but there was something different in it now. Something sharper, more dangerous. He took a step closer, as though daring her to say more. But Barbara had no more words. No, she had something far more powerful than words. With trembling hands, she dropped the saddle to the ground and stepped forward, closing the distance between them in one swift motion. Her hand shot out, grabbing him by the collar, shaking him, her body trembling with the force of her emotions. What did you do to her? Tell me, what did you make her believe? Gregorio's eyes flashed, but there was no real fear in them. Instead, a twisted kind of amusement flickered. You're angry, Barbara, but you can't blame me for what happened. She's made her choices too. She adapted. They always do. The words were like venom, like poison seeping into her skin. Her hands shook, but she didn't let go. Not yet. And then, in a moment of pure, unbridled desperation, Barbara did what she had never thought she would have to do. She ran, not away from Gregorio, but toward the truth, toward her daughter. She turned on her heel, her breath catching in her throat as she made her way toward the back of the estate. The room she knew she would find Sophie in. The air seemed heavier now, thick with the weight of what she was about to uncover. But Barbara didn't stop. She couldn't. When she found her, Sophie was standing by the window, her back turned, her shoulders slumped as though the weight of the world was pressing her down. For a moment, Barbara just stood there, watching her daughter alive but still so far away. "There's Sophie," Barbara whispered, her voice trembling. "Sophie, it's me. It's Mom." Sophie turned slowly, her face pale, her eyes wide, filled with a mixture of fear and something else, something Barbara couldn't quite place. For a moment, the world stopped moving, and all Barbara could hear was the echo of her daughter's voice, the one she had longed for, the one she had dreamed of in the darkest nights. "Mom," Sophie's voice was soft, hesitant, but there was no mistaking the flicker of recognition in her eyes. And then, in the space between them, everything fell away. All the years, all the questions, all the pain. Barbara stepped forward, her arms opening wide as she rushed toward her daughter, pulling her into the embrace that had been 8 years in the making. It wasn't a perfect moment. It wasn't easy. But it was the moment Barbara had been waiting for. The moment where love finally broke through the walls of all the pain. "You took everything from me," Barbara whispered, tears streaming down her face as she held Sophie tight. "But I will never stop loving you." Sophie's arms wrapped around her, her small hands gripping onto Barbara like a lifeline. "I never stopped hoping you would find me," Sophie murmured, her voice thick with emotion. And in that embrace, Barbara felt the truth, the kind of truth that couldn't be stolen. No matter how many years had passed, the truth that her love for Sophie had never wavered, that no matter what Gregorio had done, no matter how much time had been lost, she would find her again. And they would rebuild together. As Barbara and Sophie walked away from the estate, the Tuscan sun blazed above them, its warmth a stark contrast to the darkness they had just fled. For the first time in years, they could breathe, even as the weight of what they had left behind pressed on their hearts. The world seemed impossibly quiet now, the hum of the estate fading into a distant memory. In Sophie's eyes, Barbara saw something she hadn't seen in so long. Hope. The kind of hope that doesn't ask for answers but finds its way through the cracks, weaving itself back into the spaces left by grief. "We'll rebuild," Barbara whispered, pulling her daughter closer. "Together, nothing can take that away from us." But even as the words left her lips, Barbara knew that their journey was far from over. The shadows of the past still lingered, and the truth was still waiting to be uncovered. Some secrets have a way of hiding, even when you think they've been revealed. If this story stayed with you, let us know below. Subscribe for the next piece of the truth when it surfaces. Like, share, and tell us how it made you feel while listening.